Candlelight vigil is set for this evening to urge Governor J.B. Pritzker to veto legislation that allows for doctor-assisted suicide or end-of-life options for terminally ill patients. And interesting to see just how this will play out. And we'll keep an eye on it here. And focuses on Illinois. I'm Greg Bishop, editor of The Center Square. You can go to thecentersquare.com. I edit the Illinois page where we keep you updated each and every weekday morning here with Illinois in Focus Daily. So Governor J.B. Pritzker, this week he signed an expansion of the migrant sanctuary policies, some of the other laws that he could still enact from when they passed them during fall veto session includes the transit bailouts, which does a variety of things for mass transit, some consolidation, but it also allows for Cook County to raise taxes and some of the suburban counties to raise taxes under the Regional Transit Authority so they can get more sales taxes out of those buying goods in that area. And they're also looking to essentially sweep money from the road fund, but not from the fund, from the interest, how I understand it. So this measure still on the governor's desk, has yet to sign it. You also got the energy omnibus that really takes the state of Illinois another step closer to so-called renewable energy. And especially focused on battery storage. So that's something else that's on the governor's desk. But also on the governor's desk is Senate Bill 1950. And this is a measure that started out as a food safety bill, but in the last hours, it was converted into a End-of-Life Options for Terminally Ill Patients Act, or as others would call it, physician-assisted suicide. And the measure ultimately passed, but it came as a surprise. Listen, I'm at the Capitol covering the State House when they're going into the early morning hours, the tail end of session. It seems to be a ritual where, they have all year to do things, and then all of a sudden, the last few hours of scheduled session, they cram some of the most controversial stuff in. They've been talking about the end-of-life options for terminally ill patients for a couple of years now. They tried pushing it last year, didn't move. They tried pushing it this year earlier, and it had some movement, but then seemingly out of nowhere, while everybody's watching what's happening with transit, what's going to happen with the energy bill, what's going to happen with this bill, that bill, all of a sudden the end-of-life options bill comes up in the Senate and caught a lot of people by surprise, quite frankly. Here is State Senator Linda Holmes from Aurora, Democrat, who shared her thoughts as to why she pushed forward with this measure.
This is the bill. This is medical aid in dying. As you know, we've been talking about this for the past couple of years. I'm going to keep this brief so that I can take the time we have here to answer your questions. But we've had pretty extensive hearings on this prior to us in committee, and we had a committee in Chicago, so a lot of this has been covered. But very, very simply, this allows a person age 18 or older who receives a diagnosis of 6 months or less to live and is mentally competent to make an informed decision to have the option of self-administering a prescription to end their suffering. There are over 20 guardrails in place to make sure this is done appropriately, to make sure there is no coercion or abuse. And in the years that this has been in effect, in Oregon starting in 1997, there have been no substantiated cases of coercion or abuse. Very simply, what happens is the patient makes a request of their doctor that this is what they'd like to do. The doctor then gives them all the other options they have for end-of-life care. There's hospice, there's palliative care, there's treatment for whatever, maybe various chemotherapies if it's cancer. So the doctor has to disclose all of that to them. The person makes that request verbally. Then they have to submit a request in writing. The doctor also has to make sure that they are mentally capable of making an informed decision. If he has any doubts about that, it needs to go to a mental health care professional to make that analysis, and that's a licensed mental health care professional. there is then another doctor that comes in and has to give that same opinion of 6 months or less to live. And again, making sure that the patient is mentally capable of making the decision. The patient must be able to self-administer the drugs. A doctor or medical professional or anybody else cannot make that.
So you got Linda Holmes pushing that, and ultimately it's passed early Halloween morning. She talked about some of the issues in other states where she says there weren't any cases of this being abused, but coroners have come out saying that in those states it doesn't have a good oversight function, and that's a big problem they have. They call the grave concerns they have. You have other groups, including those who support disability communities, and they warn that this also doesn't have the proper guardrails in it to keep things from being abused. You have the Catholic Conference of Illinois putting this letter out yesterday to Governor J.B. Pritzker, and I'll just read this to you. It says, Dear Governor Pritzker, we are writing to ask you to veto Senate Bill 1950, legislation of grave moral importance that allows assisted suicide in Illinois. As governor, you will be instrumental in choosing which of two divergent paths end-of-life care in Illinois will follow. The preferred path is to ensure Illinoisans at the end of their life will have compassionate, loving care provided by trained professionals and or loving family members. The other is create an environment that allows insurance companies to provide low-cost lethal drugs to those who cannot access quality end-of-life care. The choice is clear. Please veto Senate Bill 1950. Some describe Senate Bill 1950 as the compassionate choice. This bill is not about compassion. The legislation requires no services to be offered to the person requesting death. There is no requirement that family be near the loved one at the point of death, or that the person is not being coerced into ending their life. This has already dangerously played out in other states with these laws in place. This is not compassion. A compassionate path forward, the Catholic Conference says, is to support dying persons by alleviating their suffering through palliative care, hospice care, and other comprehensive programs. The reason many seek to end their lives is the difficulties accessing quality palliative and hospice care. Without working with our legislature, our state can address this. Real compassion demands we invest in and ensure access to excellent pain medicine, in management and holistic supports for the terminally ill, allowing them to live their final days in comfort and peace, surrounded by family, friends, and other emotional supports. There are many places in Illinois where there are too few, if any, palliative care centers. For those facing serious life-limiting illness in Illinois, access to community palliative care services should be mandated and readily available. We support increasing funding for these programs and ensure that they are the highest quality possible. This legislation will also lead to more suicide in Illinois. According to a study conducted by David Patton, legalizing assisted suicide is associated with a 6.3% increase in total suicide. It defies common sense for our state to enact a 988 suicide hotline, increasing funding for suicide prevention programs, and then pass a law that, based on the experience of other jurisdictions, results in more suicides. If you were to sign this into law, what if a person who wanted physician-assisted suicide were to call this hotline? According to a 2022 United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention study, suicide is the second leading cause of death for U.S. teens and young adults 10 to 34. And according to the National Institutes of Health, suicide contagion is a real risk that these people, young people, are exposed to suicide. Your support of the 2024 Health Protection Act has shown you're concerned about insurance companies refusing to cover necessary expensive care and treatment, but the act stops short from protecting Illinoisans against cases such as those documented in other states of people being denied treatment by health insurance companies and instead offered assisted suicide. That is not compassion. We also believe that within a few short years, the alleged safeguards will no longer exist. Other states eventually eliminated their state residency requirement, thus opting assisted suicide to anyone in the world. Other safeguards have fallen too. For example, if the law allows one to end their life due to a terminal illness, what is to stop a court or future legislature from allowing a person suffering from a chronic illness to end their life? What stops someone who just wants to stop living from accessing medical assistance to do so? That has been the case in Canada, as all their safeguards were eliminated. In 2016, there were only a little over 1,000 assisted suicide deaths in Canada. Less than a decade later, there were 15,000. Similarly, other U.S. states have been slowly eliminating safeguards. We fear that once assisted suicide is legal, it becomes an acceptable alternative to both compassion care and mental health treatment that might encourage potential suicides to consider a different path. Aiding someone in killing themselves or herself is not the answer. Alleviation of suffering is the answer. The true compassionate choice. And that's signed by Blaise Subich. You've got even the Springfield Bishop Thomas John Paprocki and others, and that's the letter from the Catholic Conference. Pretty lengthy, but a lot there in their concerns. Now, a vigil's being planned this evening in Chicago on 555 West Monroe Street. You've got Patients' Rights Action Fund, Access Living. State Senator Lakeisha Collins, Democrat from Chicago, is going to be there. You've got others, different groups that are going to be speaking at this, and they're going to be holding a vigil in opposition to what they say is physician-assisted suicide. So this bill is on the governor's desk. He has until January 25th to sign it, but we're getting word it could come Friday. The governor could hold a news event, a bill signing ceremony, and sign this, or the governor could just announce that it's enacted or it's vetoed, or however else the governor will choose to act on this bill. And if you recall, last week we focused in on this a little bit with the governor being asked about it, and ultimately saying that he's thinking, he's hearing from all sides on this.
I've been listening to everybody that has a view on it. I have not announced anything or decided anything. Every time I talk to somebody, it has a little bit of an effect. You're sort of cumulatively gathering information. And I know there are people who feel passionately on both sides. I have said before that I have friends who've gone through this with their relatives. And it's painful for the person who's experiencing the pain in the last 6 months of their lives, as well as for the entire family. And sometimes with the competent decision making on the part of somebody who's suffering, it feels like for them it was the right thing to do. I'm talking about a specific circumstance I can think of in another state. And then at the same time, I understand people who have religious values that say that this is inappropriate and that we should just provide hospice care and maybe make it as comfortable as we possibly can for somebody who's dying. So it's a hard issue, and I don't want anybody to think that making up your mind about this is very easy. It's not. I think there's a lot to consider, but most of all, it's about compassion. And again, there's evidence and information on both sides that leads me to think seriously about what direction to go.
So the governor being
it's actually something that I brought up
about this, especially after meeting with the Pope a few weeks ago, and he says that they didn't necessarily go into detail about that when they had a conversation, but it was brought up. So here we are with the bill on the governor's desk. How he's going to act on it, still very much up in the air, not sure. Word is he could be acting on it before the end of the week, but that vigil being planned for tonight, and the Catholic Conference in opposition to the bill, and even disability groups not too happy about the prospect of this bill becoming law. All right, it is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning for more Illinois in Focus Daily, only with the Center Square.